I'd like to open it for questions or comments. Please, if you have to make a comment, make it very brief. We prefer questions. Okay.
Two brief questions. The first, and the one that really concerns me, why doesn't the regime, the Venezuelan regime, why don't they declare state of siege, like curfew? Why don't they clear the streets? Now, last night there was a panel of Venezuelan people at one of the local programs, including the former general, and they said that the government doesn't want the streets cleared. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever to me. So that's one question. The second question is, you yourself mentioned at the beginning, and I think Pedro also did, that in the last 3 days you have some indications that the Cubans have sent some personnel down there. Now, on a luncheon last Wednesday, Dr. Latell was there with me, Emilio, whom you all know, told us that the Cubans have covered the situation for years now. In other words, they have all the personnel that they need on the ground in Venezuela. And what they're going to do is just simply supervise. They're not going to get involved. Now, if there's something new in the last 3 days, that may change. But as far as he is concerned, the Cubans are not going to do anything new because of this. Of course, that obviously can change because the situation may get out of hand at any time. So those are the two questions. If that is the case, that they have sent some new people, that changes the equation.
Well, either they're rotating people or they're reinforcing the people they have there. The first question, why they haven't cleared the streets, maybe they don't want more bloody fighting with the students and the people that are opposing them, and they're hoping that this will wither away and disappear. I don't know why they haven't gone out and clamped down on the students.
I do not know either, but there might be a suggestion here, or perhaps an explanation. I have no idea. Let's understand something. The Venezuelan economy is not going to get better. It's not going to improve, period. They have moved to a model, a centrally planned type of economic model. Those models we know do not work. And things are not going to get better in Venezuela economically. They're not.
Their oil production is way down.
And their oil production is down. The technicians are no longer there. So perhaps this is a way to cover psychologically that. But I've heard some people saying that, you know, the Venezuelan economy is going to improve at some point. It's not going to improve at all.
I just wanted to add one thing, Jaime. You know, there are still a lot of misguided people who think that, you know, who believe this is a democratically elected regime, as if that determines that it's a democracy. You know, that's just one step. And I think that it's beginning to change. I think it's interesting, the information that's come out, because it's getting harder for anyone to sort of blindly say, well, this is a democratic elected regime where the colectivos are going through the streets murdering and beating people. So he may not want to clear the streets, and because he doesn't want to look less, how can I put it, more authoritarian to the international community, because then the opposition might get more support internationally. I don't know. I don't know if I'm right, but it's just an idea.
I have a question for the entire panel, and I'd like to know what you think of the change of leadership that Venezuela has experienced in the past 2 months, I would say, because Capriles was really the speaker for the opposition. He spoke many times. He lost the elections, but he's the governor now of Estado Miranda, and he was the leader of the opposition. All of a sudden, Leopoldo Lopez, who was more or less hiding in the background, became the leader of this movement that has grown and flourished unexpectedly. But on the other hand, Maria Corina, but Maria Corina had always been there. Leopoldo had been hiding. Maria Corina has always been. But to me, what does that mean to you? Do you know anything that I don't know about that? I think Leopoldo is a very capable and able person. He's had a lot of problems in the past. He was in prison, but he is definitely somebody that has grown tremendously in the overall political image of Venezuela. I would like somebody from the panel, but I want to make one observation before you answer my question. And that's going to your point, Jose, and to your point, Susan. The trigger to this whole thing in my book has been the economy. It's the economy, Susan. I'll give you an indicator of how things are or were in Venezuela. The black market rate, which is really the rate that is available, was last February, I would say it was about 25 bolivars to the dollar. I have a lot of friends down there. They're buying now at 93.
93?
93, if you can get it. But the problem is that now they have a number of laws, because before, what many people were doing is that they were buying dollars in the black market, all right, which was not legal, but they were doing it, bringing in stuff into their companies and selling them at a reposition rate so that they would make money if they sold it for 40 or 50, you know, might make a nice margin. But now, this guy, Maduro, has passed a number of laws which really forbids that. The margin that you can earn in any gross profit margin is 30%. So that limits it tremendously. And then he has made it absolutely now a major penalty if you're selling something which has a larger margin, or if you're selling something that does not correspond to the official rate. And he has sent people to prison for that. So there are no dollars available to buy in the economy. You're going to go to prison if you buy something at the black market rate, and if they catch you selling it, you're going to go to prison also. So I know for a fact that there is nothing in the pipeline, because they haven't given dollars to anybody. The government is saying that they're going to begin importing, but they haven't done it. So the next 2 or 3 months are going to be crucial. And the economy and the people are going to suffer a hell of a lot more in the next 2 months than they ever have in the past 12 years. That's my large comment. Please answer my question.
Well, I don't know, but isn't the opposition lucky that they have both Capriles and Lopez? And Lopez, of course, is not able to do anything now. He's in prison. And he may be there for quite a while.
Yes, but he, in my
Well,
opinion,
look,
he has
the emergence of Lopez has to do with the decline of Capriles as a national leader. Capriles has been willing to negotiate with Maduro, play the game. Lopez has been straightforward, no negotiation. Also, Lopez is much more charismatic than Maduro. So that's a second factor. So I think that's where the population of Venezuela is looking for new leadership, and I guess Capriles is on the way down.
I also think,
I
think
think it's too early to say that.
I do believe that Leopoldo Lopez mirrors the students' call for change. He mirrors the rebellion better than Capriles, that has been willing to negotiate. So his strong stand is closer to the youth of Venezuela. And also, Maria Corina has evolved and into a position where, like tomorrow, she is calling for a women's march in Venezuela, dressed in white, and is also coming as a huge, powerful leader. I think between Lopez and Maria Corina, Venezuela has two great leaders. And also, as I said before, I think in the street of Venezuela, there is a new leadership brewing. And the new leadership that has tested themselves in the street of Venezuela, in the fight. And I think this is, when you add the economic issue, I think Maduro is in huge trouble. And that might answer your first question, why they are sending new troops into Venezuela.
I just want to answer something.
Question is for Professor Roy, and has to do with the Colombian connection.
Right.
how important is, do you think, to the Colombian army that there be a change in Venezuela along the lines that we've been talking about and in regards to the corruption that you mentioned earlier? And at what point, if it is important to them, at what point do you think they would be willing to do something in response to the Cuban help to the Maduro, to the present regime?
I think with Santos as president, I don't see Colombian or even the Colombian army that is going through their own difficulties and investigations in recent weeks. They are right now clinging themselves to the peace process with the FARC. I think that is a farce, but I do believe that is where they had stuck right now their positions. I don't see the Colombian army moving and doing anything. I do think that this issue of as more people becomes aware of the few Venezuelan generals enriching themselves with the drug trafficking from Colombia, that might provoke within the Venezuelan army, the junior officers might provoke a reaction to that corruption.
Let me make a comment regarding the currency in Venezuela, and I don't think this applies to Venezuela at all, although I've heard that it's beginning to, but I know in Argentina it's beginning to happen. It seems to be that in countries where we're seeing these kind of fluctuations of currency values and things like that, some very sophisticated entrepreneurs are turning to digital currencies such as Bitcoin. I do not know to what extent this is happening, but I keep hearing a lot about people beginning to use Bitcoin or the other digital currencies to bypass the official currencies.
But there's a scandal today at the paper.
Yes, there is. I saw that too.
Susan, I have a question for you. You mentioned the possibility of sanctions against Venezuela. We export about 175,000 barrels of refined products to Venezuela. Sir, please. We export about 175,000 barrels of refined products to Venezuela daily, and we import about 1.1. As you know, there are only very few refineries in the world that can crack heavy crude without killing the catalyst. So I think those sanctions, given where the Venezuelan economy is now, will be very, very effective. I don't know how.
No, that's what I was saying. I don't know, maybe I didn't make it clear. That's exactly what I was saying, that we don't need them as much as they need us right now. Yeah, so I agree.
Okay.
One of the things that I sense is that this is a lot more complex than other types of perhaps coups that we've seen and this kind of activity. The thing that I think that really strikes me as different is that the people in Venezuela in general are looking at the Cubans like a boogeyman, you know, like the boogeyman. There's an invasion that's taken place in general. You know, usually, you know, from what you try to find is a common enemy. You try to find the boogeyman is Britain or the United States or somebody that the government tries to point to as the enemy. But I think in this case, we got something that's uniquely different. And the point is that I'd love to hear what you all have to say, because I don't think this is a one-time event. I mean, there are a lot of interests here, you know, Colombia, Cuba, the oil, the Iranians. I mean, this thing is so complex, it's unbelievable in terms of the tremendous amount of interest involved. But I don't think it's something that's going to go away, is my point, because of the Cuban presence and the Venezuelan people in general the way they're reacting to the Cubans. I mean, you can go to Caracas right now and walk around and just to the man, they're talking about the Cubans as an invasion that taken place in their country. The boogeyman is what I'm calling. I'd love to hear what you sense about this. I sense something different.
I don't see it as so much more complex than other places. I mean, look how much more complex Ukraine is. I mean, there you got Russia on the border. I mean, speaking about a bunch of Cubans versus a bunch of Russians, even though Russia is also declining and its economy is...
Russia was there. The Cubans are, Russia is, the Ukrainians look at Russia.
No, but what does that, what are you seeing as more complex?
More complex meaning the people on the streets are looking at are starting to grumble about the Cubans being an invasion. We don't want to be Cubanized.
But that's good. Yeah, that's good.
No, I'm not saying it's
But
bad.
why is that? But I don't understand the complexity of it. I mean, you got Maduro on one side saying that the empire is the boogie. There is the boogeyman. He thinks it's the empire. That's us. And now you're beginning to get, you had some dissatisfaction and unhappiness within the armed forces about all these Cubans playing a big role. In fact, Diosdado Cabello was one of them, which is why the Cubans really didn't want him. And I'm not so sure if Maduro falls that Diosdado is an obvious candidate because I don't think they trust him. I don't know who they trust, but I don't have that kind of intimate knowledge of who all the generals are. But I just think it's not more complex. Every time the people go in the streets, it turns out lots of interests are involved and stuff. But in some ways, because of the declining population, the fact that to me, the big complexity is the fact that the Chavistas, the population is armed, and that to me, I'm not quite sure how you deal with it. But, look, I'm sure that the Cubans knew Maduro was not as they say, not the brightest bulb in the box or whatever they say. I mean, he's not smart, he's not talented. The main qualification was that, he was relatively decent looking, he was civilian, and he was totally pliable by the Cubans. He was totally controllable. That was his appeal. But they knew, they risked, I think. They had to know he wasn't a brilliant guy.
I think what they present with the registration.
This young man, yes, sir.
I just want to get Pedro to point or clarify the presence of the Cubans, right? Pedro mentioned originally 5,000, you said Cuban hardliners, and now maybe 7,000 or 8,000, but 30,000 in total. I just want you to clarify who are these now 7,000 or 8,000 people, and then you mentioned their involvement in the Tupumados and the colectivos. I mean, are they the people actually in those groups? I did not know that connection.
No. The hardcore, and those are numbers that could be changing right now as we speak. But the hardcore, for years, has been mounting between 1,000, 2,000. Now with the crisis, they could be even reaching 7,000 hardcore meaning and MINFAR officers. Now, I will just mention the issue. The nationalist sentiments on the Venezuelan people and the Venezuelan army might be starting to play a role in the future. Now, the other 30,000, these are rough numbers, are not part of the Cuban military, the army. They are the doctors, the nurses, different people, but before they are sent to Venezuela, they are trained in paramilitary activities. Now, when I mention the Tupamaros and the others, these are mostly Venezuelans that throughout 12 years were trained in Cuba. And they are right now, some of them in these motorcycles are doing their talks. They usually were recruited because they belong to gangs in Venezuela, and they were trained in Cuba and are doing the repressive and criminal jobs. Go ahead.
I have a question for the Cubans in the panel. And let's go back 54 years ago. You have Leopoldo Lopez as a Cuban, okay? What would Fidel Castro have done with him, turning himself in?
Killed him on the spot.
That's the difference between an authoritarian and totalitarian.
One of the differences, yes.
That answers your question.
How did you see the Brazil connection as a possible lifesaver for Cuba in the event that actually the Venezuelan regime changes?
Well, one of the things that Raul Castro has been doing for some time and has done it very effectively is try to diversify the sources of help. Brazil being one, Iran being another, and a number of other places. So I think they have diversified it enough. It is.
I'm sorry, what?
They have diversified the sources of help enough, thinking about this. But I think there are at least 2 or 3 points here. Cuba will do what it needs to do to try to avoid losing that help. That's a given. But should they lose it? To what degree they lose it, by the way, because it could also be degrees here, that we could have some other regime in Venezuela that diminishes the assistance but doesn't eliminate it completely. At the end of the day, I don't think the Cuban regime will in any way collapse just because it loses the Venezuelan help.
Why not?
Again, because it is a totalitarian regime.
But where's its money coming from? It just now got rid of another 500,000 people from the bureaucracy.
Well,
I just wanted to play it out. But
well,
I don't.
If you compare this today with the collapse of the Soviet Union, Cuba is far better prepared today. The remittances from the diaspora all over the world is an important source of income. They have tourism now that they did not have then. So and they have other sources. So I think they have prepared to some degree. And again, at the end of the day, the Cuban people may suffer a great deal, will suffer a great deal, but that doesn't lead me. I guess I always worry about this kind of economic determinism that we seem to look at.
Yes, sir. So I want to add an element of what he was talking about, that is the economy, and how much is a question for you, Professor, how much this crisis will increase the economic problem. Because, for example, I call a customer that I have in Caracas, he said, nothing is moving here, and I am, for 15 days, I haven't get out of the of my house, and what I'm going out is to do a demonstration. So the whole country
That's a good customer. That's a good customer.
Right.
Take good care of
The
it.
whole customer is paralyzed. So we'll add what he said, it's the economy, and this will increase the problem. Because really, I think the big problem in Venezuela right now is the stomach, like everybody else. And they have nothing in the store, and they're getting desperate, and it will be less in the store.
Well, let me sort of put it this way. When we look at Cuba's economy today, it is a disaster. It has always been a disaster. And we know that command economy, centrally planned economic systems do not work. And yet, we have seen Venezuela and other places imitating Cuba. And you have to ask yourself, why? Why are they imitating it? And I think what Cuba sells is a methodology for staying in power. That is their product. It's a methodology for staying in power, not for economic. I would
Question about that. Undeniable.
Seems to me that's a very pessimistic night. So let me put a different scenario here. If you look at divided between military power, and the question is basically addressed to you, Brian. The traditional military power, economic power, soft power, correct? Venezuela is a country with 30 million people, approximately, of which about 22% of the population is between the ages of 50 and 24. So the turbulence is likely to continue. I think the Cubans have made that calculation in a way. I think they're overestimating, to a certain extent, the influence of Cuba here. The situation, the economic situation is going to get worse in Venezuela. So where is the economic power in Cuba to try to solve the economic situation in Venezuela?
They don't have it. They don't have it.
Who's going to come with $15 billion, $20 billion to solve the short-term economic situation in Venezuela?
No China.
And then, none of that. So who's the padrino at this moment? And the third question,
the Iranians.
The third question
Vito Corleone is dead.
the issue of soft power. What is the soft power of Cuba? What's the influence of Cuba and Venezuela in terms of a model, selling a model, the Cuban model in Venezuela? And two, I think you're underestimating also, in terms of soft power, the nationalistic feeling in Venezuela. I don't think that the military, the situation is serious but not grave yet. Once the situation gets very, very, very grave, I wonder what the reaction is going to be. So my point is, I think you're basically, I think, over, and what I'm trying to get at is that I think Venezuela has a chance to change the regime.
Amen.
Last brief.
I'm sorry I'm late, you might have covered this. I don't know if you covered General Angel Vivas, which is in a house now with a machine gun. He's defied the government. I heard him speak this morning. He's in total defiance of the Cuban regime, and he has a lot of people protecting him. What influence do you think he'll have on the people in Venezuela right now when they see a general is taking such a strong stand? Also, General Camacho has been arrested. He's an active general. He was arrested today. Are we seeing some kind of fracture into the military right now where it might give hope to some of the other military people to really step up and change the situation? And basically, I also wanted to ask you if you think the nationalistic feeling when they see these two generals acting this way, might that be able to spark something that could even grow bigger than we have seen right now?
Sure, I think so. I think you're absolutely right. And you put your finger on something that we haven't really talked about yet tonight, and that is the extraordinary power today, these last 2 weeks in Venezuela, of the social media, of everybody, all the kids with their cell phones taking pictures and then disseminating them all over the world. I don't know if you're seeing them the way I am. I'm watching 10 or 20 of them every day. And people are taking pictures with their phones of the troops and the colectivos in the streets, and of atrocities of civilians being beaten up in the street and bloodied and killed. And all of this is being disseminated all over Venezuela. Now the Cuban people aren't seeing any of this, but we can all see it. I urge you to look at it. It's everywhere on the internet. And this general that you mentioned, he could emerge as one of the unsung, previously, disregarded heroes. So I agree with Pedro. There are potentially a lot of new heroes in the Venezuelan opposition who may be coming out of this crisis.
I have a question for Susan.
Here it comes, Susan.
Assuming that situation deteriorates in Venezuela, and Cuba, Iran begin to organize international brigades from Latin Americans and from other parts of the world to go to Venezuela and fight on the side of the Chavistas. What do you anticipate U.S. policy?
Nothing.
Well, one, what would you recommend? And two, what would you anticipate?
Another line.
I think that then the opposition, the Venezuelan opposition has to ask for volunteers, I mean, from wherever they could come. I just do not see anything overt in terms of I mean, how long did it take us to send any weapons to, what was it, to the opposition in Syria?
Forever.
And this, well, actually, this is, yeah, but this is, I mean, they were frightened about Al-Qaeda and all of that, but with this opposition, I mean, they claim they didn't know who was in it, and et cetera. So, I mean, I really don't know. I mean, I wouldn't be adverse to more clandestine, you know, armaments, but I really think also that there should be some kind of appeal to the other Latin Americans to help as well.
What's the chance of that, Susan?
Yeah, no, I know. It's very depressing. Yeah. No, it's
So
very-
aren't the adversaries of the United States reading exactly what Brian has said, and we're just saying that the U.S. is caught in a quandary, interested in internal affairs, American public opinion, so therefore they're going to take chances, and they're going to test the Obama administration, they're going to test, okay.
I agree.
Isolation.
I mean, there are all sorts of articles lately about, you know, the weakness that the United States is projecting. And whenever you project weakness to authoritarians or totalitarians or whatever, you know, they step in.
Well, on that happy note, I'd like to thank you all for coming and thank the panel.